Abu.
He's a lovely monkey. I don't have any money. Let go of me!
Whoa!
Thank you.
Okay, and an apple for your... You looking for this, Jamal?
This was definitely a don't.
Oh, wow. What is that?
See? You. Oh. Aren't you supposed to be in the bath? Agrabah.
Evening. Your life begins now.
One whose worth lies far.
Now, first your hands.
We don't have much time.
The lamp?
Excuse me, boy, where's your boss? Kid, I've been doing this a long time, all right? You my master. Monkey?
Heavy ammunition in your camp. You got to learn to help you out. So
Begin with rubbing the lamp and saying, I wish. Got it? The most powerful being in the universe.
Can you warn me?
In the film's opening moments, we're out on open water with a seasoned sailor and his family, his wife and two children, Omar and Leanne. As the waves roll by, he begins spinning a tale for the kids, one about a clever street thief, a royal girl, and a mysterious lamp said to hold impossible magic. The children tease him that his stories hit harder when he sings them. So he gives in, turning the bedtime-style story into a musical-style narration that sweeps us straight into the sun-baked kingdom of Agrabah. Marketplace. The diamond in the rough, we land in Agrabah's bustling marketplace, where we meet Aladdin, a quick-thinking young man scraping by with nothing but his wits and his loyal monkey, Abu. He survives by dodging trouble and borrowing what he needs, but the movie immediately shows he isn't heartless. After trading a small trinket to get a bag of dates, he notices a struggling family nearby and quietly gives the food away, choosing someone else's hunger over his own. Not far away, a young woman dressed like an ordinary citizen blends into the crowd. This is Princess Jasmine. Though she's keeping her identity hidden, she sees small children without food and takes something from a vendor's stall to help them. The shopkeeper threatens to punish her harshly for stealing until Aladdin steps in. Thinking fast, he offers a bracelet as payment to calm the situation. But the moment the vendor isn't looking, Aladdin slips the bracelet back, swapping it out so the man won't realize what happened until it's too late. That trick backfires quickly. The vendor alerts the guards, and suddenly the market becomes a chase course. Rooftops, secrets, and a new name, Aladdin and the disguised princess, sprint through twisting alleys and crowded stalls, narrowly escaping the palace guards. They finally reach Aladdin's hidden rooftop spot, a modest hideout with a stunning view of the city skyline. Catching their breath, the girl introduces herself as Dahlia, keeping up the disguise. Aladdin opens up about his life. His parents died when he was young, and ever since, it's been him and Abu against the world. Dahlia notices how he acts tough, but still chooses kindness when he thinks no one's watching. Aladdin, meanwhile, studies her elegant clothes and jewelry and assumes she's not royalty, just someone important, like a servant close to the princess. As they talk, both confess the same thing in different ways. They feel trapped. Aladdin dreams of escaping his street rat life and becoming someone respected. Dahlia/Jasmine longs for freedom from rules, expectations, and a life she never got to choose. But she can't stay. As she turns to leave, she asks for her bracelet back. Aladdin agrees, then starts searching for it a little too theatrically. She knows he still has it. With a hurt look, she calls him what he is, a thief, and walks away, disappointed. Inside the palace, power, pressure, and a hidden agenda, the story shifts to the palace, where the real danger isn't in the streets, it's in the throne room. We meet Jafar, the Sultan's vizier, a man whose loyalty is just a mask for ambition. He doesn't want to advise the throne. He wants to take it. His plan centers on a legendary artifact, a magical lamp hidden inside a forbidden cave. The catch? The cave will only allow entry to someone pure of heart, humble, compassionate, and willing to help the poor. Jafar is none of those things, which is why he needs to find the one person who fits the requirement. Back with Jasmine, the Sultan introduces her to Prince Anders of Scotland, presented as a potential match. Jasmine has zero interest in being assigned a husband, and she makes that point loudly, using her Tiger Raja to scare the prince into backing off. Jafar, meanwhile, tries to push the Sultan toward an aggressive plan, using the army to invade Sherbad, the land tied to Jasmine's mother. The Sultan refuses, angered by the suggestion. Jafar attempts to influence him using a magical staff that can bend people's will, but the Sultan resists, and when Jasmine arrives, the Sultan firmly reminds Jafar to stay in his place. Then Jasmine makes her boldest move. She tells her father she doesn't want to be married off at all. She wants to rule. She believes Agrabah can be improved and that she can change people's lives if she has real power. The Sultan, stuck in tradition, refuses, insisting a woman cannot be Sultan. Heartbroken and furious, Jasmine retreats to her room. Aladdin returns the bracelet. Then everything turns soon after. Iago, Jafar's parrot, spots something unusual. Aladdin sneaking into the palace to return the bracelet. That catches Jafar's attention immediately. Aladdin slips past guards and reaches Jasmine's room, still believing she's only a handmaiden. For a tense moment, it's clear Jasmine wants to throw him out. She should. But Aladdin promises he'll come back the next night, determined to see her again and make things right. He leaves, only to be intercepted. Jafar's guards capture him, and Aladdin is dragged far from the palace, out into the desert. There, Jafar reveals the truth like a knife. The girl Aladdin thought was a servant is actually the princess. Then he dangles temptation in front of him. If Aladdin wants any chance of being worthy of her, he'll need wealth and status. Finally, Jafar makes the offer that changes everything. Go into the magical cave. Bring back the lamp. And in return, Aladdin will be rewarded with more money than he's ever imagined. And with that, The street thief is pushed toward a destiny far bigger and far more dangerous than he ever expected. That evening, Aladdin decides he's going to do something bold, something big enough to win the princess's attention. And that's exactly when Jafar makes his move. The Cave of Wonders, Jafar escorts Aladdin and Abu out into the desert and brings them to the legendary Cave of Wonders, the place hiding the magical lamp he's been hunting. Before Aladdin steps inside, Jafar lays down one strict warning: touch nothing except the lamp. Aladdin enters carefully, and instantly he's surrounded by treasures, diamonds, gold, jewels stacked like the cave itself is built from riches. But he keeps his hands to himself, remembering the rule: one wrong touch, and the cave's fury will wake up. As he moves deeper, he spots something unexpected: a magical carpet pinned under a heavy slab of stone. Aladdin helps free it, and the carpet springs to life, thrilled like a loyal puppy finally let loose. Up ahead, the lamp sits waiting, perched high on a rocky rise like it's been placed there on purpose. Aladdin climbs up, reaches out, and takes it. But the moment he succeeds, trouble follows, because Abu can't resist. He bumps a piece of treasure, triggering the cave's wrath. In seconds, the place turns hostile. Stone shudders, pathways collapse, and molten lava begins to swallow the ground. The cave isn't just angry. It's trying to bury them alive. The carpet springs into action, swooping Aladdin and Abu away from falling debris and racing them toward the exit. Jafar's betrayal, they reach the entrance, where Jafar is waiting. But he doesn't help. He doesn't even pretend to care. He demands the lamp first, like Aladdin is nothing more than a delivery boy. With danger closing in behind him, Aladdin hands it over, then begs for help. Jafar answers by trying to kill him. He attacks, forcing Aladdin to lose his footing and tumble back into the collapsing cave. For a moment, it looks like Jafar has won. He turns away, sure the boy is finished. But Abu, fast and fearless, jumps him. And during the scuffle, Abu manages to snatch the lamp back. Jafar storms off, furious, especially when he realizes the lamp is gone. His victory turns to rage in an instant. The genie appears trapped inside. Aladdin tries to think of a way out. He stares at the lamp, still not fully understanding why it's worth killing for. Almost absent-mindedly, he rubs it, and a towering blue genie erupts into the air, larger than life, loud, dramatic, and unbelievably powerful. The genie explains the rules. The lamp's owner gets 3 wishes, and wishes come true when properly stated. Aladdin doesn't waste time. His first request is simple: get them out of the cave. With a snap and a swirl of magic, Genie pulls Aladdin, Abu, and the carpet to safety. Once they're free, Genie starts talking about his own dream. After centuries trapped in the lamp, all he wants is to be human, truly free. Aladdin, trying to sound confident, promises he'll use his final wish to grant Genie that freedom. Genie reminds him, that would be the 3rd wish. Aladdin tries to argue that escaping the cave shouldn't count, but Genie, after some back and forth, reluctantly lets it slide, rolling his eyes like he knows he's being played but doesn't want to fight about it. Becoming Prince Ali. Now, Aladdin aims straight for his goal. He wants to be someone the palace will respect, someone Jasmine could actually choose. So he makes his next wish: turn me into a prince. Genie delivers in the most over-the-top way possible. Aladdin becomes Prince Ali. Abu is transformed into a massive, royal-looking animal to match the act, and a full parade appears out of thin air. Guards, dancers, music, luxury, the whole spectacle. Prince Ali arrives in Agrabah like a living celebration. The palace opens its gates. The Sultan welcomes this prince in, and Aladdin is brought face to face with Jasmine, who doesn't recognize him at all beneath the costume, confidence, and performance. A shaky first impression, Aladdin tries to propose, but he fumbles badly. Instead of speaking to Jasmine like a person, he talks like she's a prize in a contest, something to be won. Jasmine is offended, unimpressed, and makes it clear she won't be bought by wealth or charm. Later, at a party, Aladdin tries again. Genie uses magic to make him dance flawlessly, hoping that style will cover for Aladdin's nerves. It doesn't work. Jasmine walks away without giving him what he wants: approval, attention, interest. Aladdin refuses to accept defeat, but Genie tells him the truth: stop performing. Just be yourself. Aladdin doesn't believe that's enough. He thinks he needs something bigger, something unforgettable. The rooftop visit and the carpet ride Genie suggests he talk to Jasmine honestly, in private. So Aladdin comes up with a plan: create a distraction with Genie, especially since Genie and the real Dahlia clearly have chemistry, while Aladdin sneaks away on a magic carpet to Jasmine's room. Jasmine is suspicious at first, sensing something familiar about him, but Aladdin carefully dodges the truth again. Then he shows her the carpet, repeats the words she remembers from their first encounter: "Do you trust me?" and offers her an escape for the night. She says yes. The carpet lifts them into the sky, carrying them above Agrabah, across glowing rooftops and open air. For a brief moment, Jasmine feels free. She almost recognizes him, almost connects the dots. But Aladdin lies again, claiming he once lived among the poor only to understand their struggles. Jasmine believes him, at least enough to keep enjoying the moment. And for the first time, it feels like the two of them might actually be getting close, even if it's built on a secret that could destroy everything later. The next morning, Aladdin can't sit still. Still riding the high of that magical night, he heads out, determined to see Jasmine again. But before he can get anywhere near her, Jafar and the palace guards intercept him, this time with no patience and no pretending. Jafar tests the truth. Jafar reveals he knows the Prince Ali act is a lie. To prove it, he sets a trap. He has Aladdin seized and shoved off a high ledge into the ocean, expecting one thing: if Aladdin truly has the lamp, the genie will save him. As Aladdin falls, Abu and the magic carpet scramble to help, racing to get the lamp back to him. In the chaos, the lamp ends up in the water. Aladdin sinks and loses consciousness, but luck, or fate, steps in. His hand brushes the lamp, and the genie bursts out. With no time to argue, Aladdin uses his second wish to survive. Genie pulls him back from death, restoring him just in time. Exposing Jafar once Aladdin recovers, he rushes to the Sultan with Jasmine at his side and finally says what needs to be said: Jafar is a traitor. Jafar storms in right after, attempting to regain control the way he always has, by using his enchanted staff to bend the Sultan's will. But this time Aladdin sees it clearly. He yanks the staff away and smashes it, breaking the spell and exposing how Jafar has been manipulating the throne. With the truth undeniable, the Sultan orders Jafar arrested and imprisoned. But Jafar isn't finished. That night, Iago sneaks in, steals the keys, and frees him, quietly setting the stage for the real takeover: Aladdin's promise. And his biggest line, meanwhile, the palace celebrates. The Sultan thanks Aladdin for saving the kingdom and announces that Jasmine will marry him. Everything Aladdin dreamed of is suddenly within reach, but it comes with a problem. Aladdin realizes that without the genie, he can't keep up the Prince Ali illusion forever. So he goes back on his promise, telling Genie he can't set him free. He needs his third wish to maintain the royal disguise. Genie is crushed. He calls Aladdin out for hiding behind lies and asks him how long he plans to live as someone else. Hurt and disappointed, Genie withdraws into the lamp, leaving Aladdin alone with his guilt. Jafar steals the lamp and takes control not long after. While Aladdin is out in the city, Jafar, now disguised, slips in and steals the lamp, becoming Genie's new master. Back at his home, Aladdin starts replaying Genie's words in his head. He finally accepts the truth: I can't keep doing this. He decides he'll confess everything to Jasmine and the Sultan, and then he realizes the worst part: the lamp is gone. Jafar's wishes. Jafar marches into the throne room and wastes no time using his new power. For his first wish, he forces the genie to make him Sultan, right in front of everyone. Even Hakim, the loyal captain of the guards, is pressured into obedience. The guards begin to bow to Jafar as if the kingdom has instantly rewritten its own rules. Jasmine tries to appeal to Hakim's conscience, reminding him he serves the kingdom, not a selfish man hungry for power. Hakim hesitates, recognizing something isn't right, and that resistance enrages Jafar. So Jafar makes a second wish. He demands to be the most powerful sorcerer alive. Genie is bound by the lamp and grants it. Jafar's magic surges, and he locks down the palace, imprisoning guards and tightening his grip. The mask comes off, Aladdin returns, and tries to steal the lamp back, but he fails. Jafar publicly destroys him by revealing the truth. Aladdin isn't a prince at all, just an ordinary boy from the streets. To make an example of him, Jafar banishes Aladdin to the farthest reaches of the world, cold, desolate, and hopeless. Then Jafar turns to Jasmine with a cruel ultimatum: marry him, or he'll kill her father and Dahlia. Jasmine agrees outwardly to protect them, but she refuses to be broken. Exile, in return, Aladdin wakes in a frozen wasteland, surrounded by ice and snow. He finds Abu trapped in a narrow crevice and fights through the cold to rescue him. Even there, the magic carpet finds them and pulls them back towards safety, refusing to abandon them. By the next day, they're racing home. Back in Agrabah, the forced wedding is about to happen. Jasmine is moments from being trapped forever, until she sees Aladdin returning on the carpet. She lights up with hope, instantly shifting into action. She distracts Jafar and manages to get her hands on the lamp, leaping onto the carpet to escape with it. Jafar unleashes chaos. He transforms Iago into a massive, terrifying bird to chase them through the sky. Iago manages to snatch the lamp mid-flight, only for the struggle to continue as everyone fights to control it. The Sultan even helps where he can, knocking Jafar's staff away during the confusion. The spell breaks, and Iago is forced back into his normal form. Abu snatches the lamp again, but Jafar is relentless, using raw magic to overpower them. Jafar's final mistake, Aladdin realizes the only way to win is to use Jafar's greed against him. He tells him the truth: no matter how powerful he becomes, he'll never be more powerful than the genie. That line hooks Jafar like bait. Blinded by ego, Jafar uses his third wish. He demands to become a genie himself, power without limits. Genie grants the wish, and instantly the trap snaps shut. Aladdin points out the cost. A genie's power comes with a prison. Now that Jafar is a genie, he must be bound to a lamp, forced to serve whoever controls it. Jafar is sucked into his own lamp, defeated by the very thing he wanted most. Genie tosses the lamp away, flinging it back where it began, far from the palace, far from temptation. Freedom, truth, and a new future Agrabah is released from Jafar's magic, and the kingdom finally breathes again. Genie prepares himself for the usual ending, back into the lamp, because Aladdin still has one wish left. But Aladdin surprises everyone believes him least. Instead of using that final wish for status or a disguise, Aladdin keeps his promise and wishes for Genie's freedom. The magic changes everything. Genie is no longer bound. He becomes truly free, able to choose his own life and to use his power for good. He embraces Aladdin, grateful beyond words. Genie then sets off to explore the world with Dahlia, and the story circles back to where it began, revealing that the sailor from the opening is tied to this journey, making the tale feel like a legend passed down through generations. Finally, the Sultan does what he refused to do before. He admits Jasmine is ready. He passes the authority to her, giving her the freedom to rule and to marry for love, not politics. Jasmine runs after Aladdin, choosing him openly at last, with no disguises left between them. And in the end, Aladdin and Jasmine build a future together, while Genie and Dahlia chase their own new horizon. Analysis: what if I told you that Aladdin was never really about the lamp? Not about the genie, not even about magic. What if the real wish at the heart of this story was the desire to be seen? Because when Disney announced a live-action remake of Aladdin, the internet didn't exactly rub the lamp with excitement. People were skeptical, nervous, even hostile. How do you remake a classic? How do you replace Robin Williams? And why does the genie look like that? And yet, against all odds, Aladdin 2019 didn't just survive. It became one of Disney's most commercially successful live-action remakes. But was it actually good? Today, we're diving deep into Aladdin 2019, not just as a remake, but as a reinterpretation. We'll break down the story, characters, themes, filmmaking choices, performances, music, and cultural impact, and ask the real question: did Aladdin wish for something new, or did it just polish an old lamp? Stick around, because this movie has more going on beneath the glittering surface than you might remember. Aladdin was released in 2019, directed by Guy Ritchie, a filmmaker best known for fast-paced crime films, stylized dialogue, and kinetic editing. Not exactly the first name you'd expect for a Disney fairy tale. The screenplay was written by John August and Guy Ritchie, adapting Disney's 1992 animated classic, which itself was inspired by Middle Eastern folktales from 1001 Nights. Genre-wise, Aladdin sits at the crossroads of fantasy, adventure, musical, romance, and family film. The runtime clocks in at just over 2 hours. It's an English-language film produced by the United States, but heavily influenced by Middle Eastern aesthetics, mythology, and music. And right away, you can feel Disney attempting something tricky here, honoring nostalgia while also modernizing the story for a global, contemporary audience. At its core, Aladdin tells a classic rags-to-riches story. We follow Aladdin, a street-smart orphan living in the vibrant city of Agrabah. He survives through quick thinking, faster running, and a strong moral compass that separates him from the criminals around him. One fateful encounter brings him face-to-face with Princess Jasmine, a woman trapped not by walls, but by expectations. She longs to rule, not be ruled over, to choose her own destiny instead of being married off like a political asset. Enter Jafar, the Sultan's calculating and power-hungry advisor, whose ambitions stretch far beyond the palace walls. His obsession with control and authority leads him to a mysterious magical artifact, one that can grant unimaginable power, but only to the right person. Aladdin's journey quickly transforms from survival to self-discovery. With magic in play, identities blur, truths are tested, and wishes come with consequences. The stakes aren't just about love or power, they're about authenticity, about whether becoming someone else is worth losing who you really are. And that's all we'll say for now. Aladdin is a protagonist defined by contradiction. He's confident but insecure, clever but underestimated. His biggest flaw isn't greed, it's self-doubt. He believes the world only values princes, not street rats. Princess Jasmine, however, is the emotional backbone of this version of the story. Unlike earlier interpretations, she's not just waiting to be chosen. She wants to lead. Her motivation is crystal clear. She loves her people and believes she can rule Agrabah better than anyone else. Jafar is a fascinating antagonist because he mirrors Aladdin in many ways. Both came from nothing. Both felt invisible. The difference is that Jafar believes power must be taken, while Aladdin believes it must be earned. The genie is the heart and soul of the film. He's humorous, yes, but also deeply tragic, bound by rules, craving freedom, and constantly performing to hide centuries of loneliness. Supporting characters like the Sultan and Dahlia serve essential emotional functions, grounding the story, expanding Jasmine's world, and reinforcing the film's evolving perspective on leadership and loyalty. The central theme of Aladdin is identity. Who are you when no one is watching? And who do you pretend to be when everyone is? The magic lamp symbolizes shortcuts, the temptation to skip growth, effort, and self-acceptance. Wishes offer solutions, but they also expose insecurities. Jasmine's storyline introduces a powerful theme of female leadership and voice. Her desire to rule isn't rebellion, it's responsibility. She wants agency, not escape. Jafar represents what happens when ambition loses empathy. His rise is fueled by resentment, not vision. Power becomes his identity and ultimately his prison. Freedom is another recurring motif. Aladdin wants freedom from poverty. Jasmine wants freedom from tradition. The genie wants freedom from servitude. Ironically, the character with the most power has the least freedom, until someone finally chooses to do the right thing. Guy Ritchie's direction brings a kinetic energy to the film, especially in chase sequences and musical numbers. While not all of his signature style fits seamlessly into a Disney musical, moments of visual momentum feel fresh. The tone balances spectacle with sincerity, though sometimes it leans a bit too heavily on safe, crowd-pleasing beats. Ritchie clearly understands movement and rhythm, but emotional moments occasionally feel rushed. Compared to his earlier work, this is a restrained Guy Ritchie, less grit, more gloss, but still recognizable in pacing and framing. Visually, Aladdin is vibrant, colorful, and intentionally theatrical. Agrabah feels like a living tapestry, bustling markets, golden palaces, deep blues and reds dominating the palette. Costumes are lavish and expressive, often communicating character growth visually. The use of CGI is hit or miss. The genie's design sparked controversy, but within the film's heightened reality, it eventually finds its rhythm. Flying sequences emphasize wonder over realism, leaning into fairy tale logic rather than physics, a smart choice for the genre. Music is where Aladdin truly shines. Classic songs return with modern arrangements, while new additions, especially Jasmine's solo, deepen emotional resonance. Sound design enhances scale. Bustling crowds, echoing palaces, and magical effects all contribute to immersion. Silence is used sparingly, but effectively, allowing emotional beats to breathe amid the spectacle. The cast carries the film with confidence. The actor portraying Aladdin brings warmth and charm, making the character likable even when flawed. Jasmine's performance stands out for its conviction and emotional clarity. She feels like a leader in the making, not a passive royal. The genie is a bold reinterpretation, not an imitation, and succeeds by embracing sincerity over mimicry. Chemistry between the leads feels natural, playful, and emotionally grounded. Editing keeps the film moving at a brisk pace, though some transitions feel abrupt. Musical numbers are tightly cut, maintaining energy, while quieter scenes occasionally feel compressed. At over 2 hours, the runtime is justified, but trimming a few subplots could have strengthened momentum. As a live-action remake, Aladdin exists in a complicated cultural space. Disney faced scrutiny over representation, authenticity, and modernization. While not perfect, the film made visible efforts toward inclusivity and respect. It reflects a shifting Hollywood landscape, one where nostalgia must coexist with progress. At a deeper level, Aladdin asks whether power changes who we are or simply reveals us. The genie's freedom is symbolic of breaking cycles of exploitation. Jafar's final wish is the ultimate irony, absolute power with absolute isolation. And Jasmine's ending isn't just political, it's philosophical. Leadership isn't inherited, it's chosen. Critics were mixed, but audiences responded enthusiastically. The film grossed over $1 billion worldwide, solidifying its place as one of Disney's most successful remakes. Its legacy lies not in replacing the original, but standing beside it as an alternative interpretation. Its strengths include strong performances, musical reinvention, and thematic expansion. Its weaknesses stem from uneven CGI, occasional pacing issues, and playing things too safe. But ambition, even imperfect, deserves recognition. Aladdin 2019 isn't about recreating magic, it's about redefining it. This is a film for fans of the original, newcomers seeking spectacle, and anyone curious about how stories evolve over time. Not flawless, but heartfelt, vibrant, and worth the journey. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest wish it grants is reminding us that being yourself is the bravest magic of all. I'm a huge Disney fan and have been for pretty much my whole life. Cinderella, Peter Pan, and The Lion King were my first Disney films, and I still adore all three, especially The Lion King. Aladdin has always ranked near the top for me too. The animation, the songs, the characters, and of course Robin Williams' legendary voice work make it one of my favorite animated films, and honestly, one of my favorite films, period. So when I first heard a live-action remake was happening, I wasn't exactly thrilled. I try to keep an open mind about remakes, and I've enjoyed a few of Disney's recent live-action takes, Cinderella and The Jungle Book being the standouts. I also generally like Will Smith when the material suits him, and I grew up watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. As for Guy Ritchie, he's not really my thing, but I went in without wanting to prejudge. I ended up seeing Aladdin, 2019, with cautious, mixed expectations, partly because I'm such a fan of the original, and partly because friends told me it was fun. Sadly, I walked out leaning more toward the disappointed side, and that's even when trying to judge the film on its own terms. On the plus side, the movie absolutely goes big on spectacle, and much of it is genuinely impressive. The look is vibrant and lavish, with colorful costumes, ornate sets, and a glossy, almost musical theater meets Bollywood energy. Not a criticism, just the vibe. There are moments where the visuals really dazzle, and the film does know how to put on a show. Musically, it's a treat. With Alan Menken's involvement still felt in the score and songs, the film's biggest strength, its music, remains a major highlight. The classic numbers are still the main event. Friend Like Me and A Whole New World are handled with a lot of care, and I actually appreciated some of the bolder reworking of Arabian Nights. The new songs are a mixed bag, but Speechless stands out as the stronger addition and, more importantly, gives Jasmine a bigger emotional and narrative presence. And that leads to what I think is the remake's best upgrade, Jasmine. She's easily the most compelling and fully developed character here, with clearer motivation and more agency than in the animated version. Naomi Scott is terrific, bright, grounded, and commanding when the film lets her be. Will Smith also deserves credit. Stepping into a role so tied to Robin Williams is an impossible assignment, but he attacks it with energy and charm, and he finds his own rhythm often enough to make it work. Mena Massoud is likable as Aladdin, even if he doesn't always bring the same spark as the others. But for me, the film's shortcomings are hard to ignore. The biggest issue is that it feels like the wrong fit behind the camera. Guy Ritchie's style doesn't really blend with this material, and the direction often feels too loud, too showy, and not nearly subtle enough when it needs to be. Some of the cinematography is eye-catching, sure, but a lot of it also comes off overstated and a bit gimmicky rather than magical. The effects are another weak point. Even from the early footage, Genie's look felt odd to me, and in the finished film that feeling didn't improve. There's a heaviness to the CGI throughout, and the movie sometimes leans on digital spectacle when it could have benefited more from grounded charm and practical texture. Story-wise, it doesn't collapse the way some remakes do, but it often lacks the warmth and soul that made the animated version timeless. It's not as rigidly copy and paste as the recent live-action Lion King, yet the parts that stay faithful don't land with the same punch. And the new material, while occasionally worthwhile, mostly adds length rather than depth. The pacing drags in places, and I couldn't shake the thought that trimming 10 to 15 minutes would have helped a lot, a problem I also had with Beauty and the Beast. The villain is another letdown. Jafar here feels strangely flat, more like a placeholder than a true threat. On paper, certain added details should make him more interesting, but in practice he comes off one note and forgettable. The animal side characters also don't leave much of an impression this time around. Abu has a few fun moments, but overall the supporting cast lacks that extra personality that made them pop in the animated film. And yes, I also missed the distinctive voice energy that helped define Iago originally. In the end, Aladdin, 2019, has plenty of color, music, and surface-level entertainment, plus a genuinely strong Jasmine and a commendably fresh take on Genie. But for me, it trades too much heart for flash. It's often fun to look at and listen to, yet it rarely feels enchanted in the way it needs to. Disney's live-action Aladdin sticks closely to the familiar fairy tale structure, but it opens with enough energy and spectacle to make it feel like its own ride, at least at first. The story kicks off with Princess Jasmine slipping out into the city to see what life is like beyond palace walls. She tries to help a few hungry street kids by handing out bread, but quickly finds herself in trouble when she can't pay. That's where Aladdin, A clever, street-smart thief with a good heart steps in. It's a classic chance meeting setup, and it works, even if the movie occasionally asks us to accept coincidences a bit too easily. Back at the palace, Jasmine is under pressure to marry a prince, not because she wants to, but because tradition demands it. Meanwhile, the Sultan's advisor Jafar is playing his own long game. He discovers Aladdin and uses him as a disposable tool, sending him into the Cave of Wonders to retrieve a mysterious lamp, and strictly the lamp. Inside, Aladdin also crosses paths with a magic carpet, but Jafar's betrayal comes fast. Once the lamp is in reach, Aladdin is left for dead in the cave. Of course, Aladdin isn't alone for long. His loyal monkey Abu snatches the lamp, and with the carpet's help, they escape. When Aladdin rubs the lamp, the film fully leans into fantasy as the genie appears, played by Will Smith, and offers the famous deal, 3 wishes. At this point, the movie becomes a good example of Disney's current strategy, turning animated classics into big, glossy live-action events. From a business standpoint, it's obvious why they do it. The stories are already beloved, the brand recognition is massive, families show up, and the studio has a whole library of familiar titles waiting to be reintroduced. It's safe, calculated, and, most of the time, profitable. Production-wise, it's hard to complain. The world is heavily CGI, but it still feels real enough to sell the setting. Costumes pop, sets are packed with color, and the casting mostly clicks. And yes, Genie being a big blue/purple Will Smith could have been a disaster, but somehow it lands better than expected. He isn't trying to replicate Robin Williams, and that's probably the right move, even if it creates its own problem. Smith's Genie sometimes feels like he's performing near the role rather than fully inside it. Where I start to have issues is the story's emotional glue. There's a people see what they want to see idea baked into the romance and the disguised plot, and it makes sense on movie logic. But at times it doesn't fully hold up on emotional logic. For the romance to feel earned, Jasmine's recognition, or lack of recognition, needs to feel believable. The film mostly patches this by having her catch on quickly and by letting Aladdin talk his way through it, but the story still feels like it could help her out more. A small tweak could have strengthened it. Maybe their first meeting happens in deeper shadow or in a chaotic moment where she never really sees him clearly. Or maybe Aladdin is presented more openly as a steals from the rich, helps the poor kind of figure, someone who intentionally stays hidden. Not because he's ashamed, but because it's how he survives. The film doesn't need a full rewrite, but it also shouldn't treat the original beats like they're untouchable. Visually, the movie is a mixed bag. Some sequences look gorgeous in a throwback adventure movie way, almost like a classic Hollywood exotic fantasy. But the modern editing style can be overly frantic. The camera moves fast, cuts quickly, and in certain scenes, everything blurs into motion. During big ensemble musical moments, there's so much happening at once that it's hard to actually take it all in, which turns what should be a crowd-pleasing highlight into something a little exhausting. That said, not every musical number suffers. Prince Ali is staged with grand, parade-like showmanship and is easily one of the most entertaining sequences in the film. Big, theatrical, and totally committed. A Whole New World, on the other hand, looks pretty but is sometimes weighed down by dim lighting and overly dark nighttime visuals, which keeps it from feeling as magical as it should. As for the cast, Mena Massoud brings charm to Aladdin, and Naomi Scott gives Jasmine real fire and determination. Even if her freedom and public actions would realistically cause much bigger consequences in a strict royal setting, the movie clearly wants her to be a modern-style heroine, and she sells that angle. Marwan Kenzuri's Jafar has presence and a kind of sleek magnetism, but he doesn't have the playful menace and humor that made the animated version's villain so memorable. He feels colder and more serious, which is a choice, but it also makes him less fun to watch. In the end, this remake gets a lot right. The look, the energy, the performances mostly, and the big musical staging when it slows down enough to let you enjoy it. But it's also a case of too much at times, too much motion, too many rapid cuts, too many moments where the film rushes past its own emotional beats. It's entertaining, but not the kind of movie that really rewards repeat viewings in a theater. If anything, it might play better at home, where the spectacle doesn't overwhelm the details. The opening has such a swashbuckling vibe that it almost feels like Disney is nudging toward franchise territory, and by the end you can sense the studio thinking about continuing the story. Still, part of me hopes they resist the temptation. Some stories don't need to become an endless chain of sequels. Sometimes it's better to let the lamp cool down, close the cave, and leave Jafar, well enough, alone. This version comes from Guy Ritchie, who directs and shares a writing credit. He's the kind of filmmaker whose reputation still gets split between his pop culture tabloid era and the movies people actually remember him for. Even though he's British, there's surprisingly little British flavor baked into the final product. This is very much a glossy, studio-scale American blockbuster, only it's staged in a stylized, fictionalized, Arab-inspired setting. And the most American ingredient is obvious: Will Smith. He's easily the biggest name in the cast, and it's not hard to imagine the marketing team breathing a sigh of relief once he signed on as the Genie. Whether or not he delivers the most nuanced performance is almost beside the point. His star power does a lot of heavy lifting, and the film leans into that. Runtime-wise, you're looking at a little over 2 hours. As for the plot, it's Aladdin. If you know the animated story, you already know the basic beats, and I won't retread every turn. It's also been a while since I last watched the original, so I can't give you a strict checklist of what's identical and what's been reshaped. Visually, this movie is driven far more by effects and spectacle than by anything resembling traditional animation. The Genie sequences, and later, some villain-adjacent magic, are loaded with CGI, and the animal characters rely heavily on digital work too. Jasmine's tiger, and especially Abu, Aladdin's mischievous little companion. Honestly, Abu nearly steals the film. His expressions, timing, and chaotic energy are consistently funny, and I found myself wishing the movie gave him even more to do. Unfortunately, once the story shifts deeper into its second half, he fades into the background more than I wanted. For the human leads, Mena Massoud as Aladdin is fine, solid, agreeable, and never distracting, but he didn't leave me with a ton of standout moments either. Naomi Scott as Jasmine, though, really pops. She's convincing as both the glamorous princess and as someone with a clear sense of purpose. This take on Jasmine also feels more openly self-directed and politically minded, whether that's a modern adjustment or an emphasis that's simply stronger here. It works for the most part, and I liked her presence. Jafar is trickier. I get why they didn't want him to be too nightmarish. This is still meant to play as a family fantasy. Even so, the character's vibe feels toned down compared to what many people associate with the animated version. He's less slimy menace, more controlled schemer, and that shift won't work equally well for everyone. The Sultan also doesn't add much beyond what the story requires, and in a couple spots the costuming/makeup choices didn't fully land for me. That said, the visual presentation is where the movie consistently delivers. Costumes, sets, and overall production design are lavish, and the effects are generally strong. If you're watching for the theme park side of the experience, it mostly provides what you came for. The songs, unfortunately, didn't hit as hard for me, but that might be on me because I watched a dub version German. Musical moments often lose punch when the voice performances aren't the original recordings, so if you're deciding how to watch, I'd recommend going with the original language if you can. I also want to give a quick nod to Hakeem, who I enjoyed more than I expected. He adds a likable presence and a bit of grounded energy amid all the fantasy chaos. Now, about Will Smith's Genie. No, he doesn't resemble the animated Genie, and honestly, trying to recreate that exact vibe would have been a trap. There's no perfect real-world match for that performance or design. Smith approaches it as his version, and while I'm not the biggest Smith fan these days, I thought he worked well enough here. The movie also makes a point of featuring him right away in an opening sequence set years later, almost like a don't forget who the headliner is reminder. It does function as a framing device, him telling the story to his kids, but the film doesn't fully commit to circling back in a neat, symmetrical way at the end. Not a huge issue, just something I noticed because that opening sets an expectation the movie doesn't totally pay off. By the end of it, my takeaway is pretty simple. This is mostly exactly what you'd predict from the premise, the budget, and the creative team. It has a handful of genuinely fun or charming moments, especially when Abu is being a menace. And it also has stretches where the spectacle feels more technically impressive than emotionally exciting. For example, the big Tada introduction to Genie is staged like it should be jaw-dropping, but it didn't really blow me away. I am curious whether it ever makes a serious dent in award season for any visual categories, costumes, effects, that kind of thing, but I could also see it being the sort of movie people enjoy, move on from, and then barely remember by the time nominations roll around. What I can do instead, write a fresh, original movie review that keeps the same theme, opinions, and key talking points. Abu being a highlight, Carpet/Iago mentioned, but not huge, Aladdin's thief but kind angle handled well, solid watch / no big surprises, plus your Disney live action / Guy Ritchie skepticism. Here's an original version you can use. Disney's recent habit of turning animated classics into live action movies has been a mixed bag. Some of these remakes have real momentum and personality. Others feel like expensive déjà vu going into Aladdin 2019. I honestly wasn't sure where it would land for me. The trailer left me uncertain, and Guy Ritchie directing didn't exactly scream modern classic after a few underwhelming years. Add in the early reactions to a blue Genie and a Jafar who looked more model than menace, and I was prepared to be disappointed. But the movie mostly works. Let's get this out of the way. This isn't one of those films that completely floors you. It's not a mind-blowing reinvention, and it doesn't deliver huge shocks, good or bad. What it is, though, is consistently entertaining, well-paced, and easy to sit through from start to finish. The biggest surprise for me wasn't the big set pieces. It was how much I enjoyed Abu. The little guy ends up being one of the most fun parts of the movie, and he brings a lot of warmth to Aladdin's scenes. He's not just cute sidekick decoration, either. His presence reinforces what the film wants you to believe about Aladdin. That he's a scrappy survivor, but not cruel or selfish at heart. That thief, but still a good person, balancing act is something the story has to sell, and I think the film handles it pretty well. Aladdin steals because he has to, but the movie makes sure you see his conscience in action, especially in moments where he gives what little he has to someone who needs it more. That's the core message. Don't treat him like a villain just because he's living outside the law. He's meant to be the guy with the right instincts in the wrong situation. On the villain's side, Jafar's ambition is clear enough. He's tired of being second in command and wants absolute power. His parrot Iago is around too, as expected, but neither he nor the magic carpet ended up being especially memorable to me. The carpet does a ton, to be fair. Honestly, it's an underrated MVP at times, swooping in to rescue people and get characters out of trouble when things go sideways. Still, despite being useful, it didn't leave as strong an impression as I expected. There are also a few moments that stretch believability a bit, like how quickly certain characters assume rescue is going to arrive exactly on time. It's one of those movie logic beats where confidence replaces common sense, and you just roll with it. Will Smith's Genie is a big talking point, and I'll say this. He's not trying to mimic the original energy beat for beat, and that's probably the right move. He brings a different vibe, more modern, more playful in his own way, and it helps the film feel less like a pure copy. Whether you love it or not will depend on what you want from the character, but I didn't find him to be the disaster some people feared after the trailer. Story-wise, you're getting the familiar structure. Street kid meets princess, power-hungry advisor hunts a magical shortcut. Cave adventure goes wrong, and the genie's rules come with complications that force the hero to grow. If you already know the original, you'll recognize most of the turns. The movie's strength isn't surprise, it's execution. In the end, that's how I describe this Aladdin. Steady, solid, and enjoyable, without pretending to be life-changing cinema. If you're open to Disney's live-action era, and you don't actively dislike the original story, this is worth your time. It's a thumbs up from me, and honestly, I think both versions can coexist just fine. Genie may be all-powerful, but he's clearly not immune to romance. In Disney's 2019 live-action Aladdin, he develops a sweet side story with Jasmine's handmaiden, Dahlia, while Aladdin tries to win Jasmine's heart the old-fashioned way, with honesty and, okay, a flying carpet. After Aladdin becomes Prince Ali, he whisks Jasmine across the skies for a sweeping tour of the world. During the trip, Jasmine starts connecting the dots and realizes this prince feels an awful lot like the street kid she met earlier. Aladdin tries to explain it away as him dressing down to escape palace pressures, and while Jasmine isn't fully buying it, she's moved by the idea that he wants to be seen as a person, not a title. Meanwhile, Jafar isn't fooled for long. He uncovers Aladdin's secret, corners him about the lamp's whereabouts, and when Aladdin refuses to give him what he wants, Jafar has him thrown into the sea like yesterday's problem. Aladdin barely survives until Abu and the magic carpet arrive with the lamp. Aladdin rubs it, collapses, and Genie pulls off a life-saving rescue. But it comes at the cost of Aladdin's second wish. That moment lands with real weight because it underlines the film's main theme. Power always has a price, and shortcuts aren't free. Back in Agrabah, Aladdin and Jasmine join forces to expose Jafar's plot. The Sultan has him arrested, but Jafar's parrot psychic Iago makes sure the story isn't over, stealing the keys and springing him loose. Aladdin is offered a path to the throne as the Sultan's heir, but fear creeps in. If Jasmine finds out who he really is, will she still choose him? In that panic, he breaks his promise to Genie about setting him free, and the betrayal stings. Their friendship is the heart of the movie, so that crack in it matters. Jafar, using the same streetwise cunning he loves to mock in Aladdin, steals the lamp and becomes Genie's new master. His first wish puts him on the throne as Sultan, and suddenly everyone is forced to yes, sir their way through his rule. But Jasmine finally gets the moment she deserves. She stands her ground and persuades Hakim, the head guard, to stay loyal to the true Sultan instead of obeying a fraud with a fancy title. Furious, Jafar escalates with his second wish, turning himself into an unstoppable sorcerer. He banishes Aladdin and Abu to a frozen wasteland and threatens to harm Dahlia, and the Sultan, unless Jasmine agrees, to marry him. Genie, despite being hurt, still helps, magically guiding the carpet to rescue Aladdin and bring him home. During the wedding ceremony, Aladdin returns at the last possible second, and with Jasmine's help, he manages to reclaim the lamp. Jafar unleashes one last chase by transforming Iago into a massive rock-like creature to pursue them and seize the lamp again, wrecking the carpet in the chaos. In the final showdown, Aladdin wins not by brute force, but by psychology. He needles Jafar's ego, pointing out that no matter how high he climbs, he's still living in Genie's shadow, always second best. Predictably, Jafar can't stand that. He wastes his final wish trying to become the most powerful being in existence. But the wording backfires. Genie turns him into a genie too, chained to his own lamp, imprisoned by the very power he craved. Jafar is sealed away with Iago, and the city snaps back to normal. Then comes the film's most satisfying emotional payoff. Genie encourages Aladdin to use his last wish so he can marry Jasmine, but Aladdin finally chooses character over convenience. He frees Genie instead, making him human. The Sultan declares Jasmine the next ruler of Agrabah and changes the law so she can marry who she wants, meaning Aladdin doesn't have to pretend to be anyone else. Genie sails off to see the world with Dahlia, now his wife, and yes, they even get a warm little happily ever after of their own. The supporting cast also includes Billy Magnuson as the overeager Prince Anders and Robbie Haynes as Rizal. As a remake, this version feels both comfortingly familiar and lightly refreshed. You know the story beats, but there are enough tweaks, especially around Jasmine's agency and Genie's subplot, to keep it from feeling like a scene-for-scene photocopy. The musical highlights still do the heavy lifting. Friend Like Me, Prince Ali, and A Whole New World remain the core crowd pleasers, and the new Jasmine song Speechless is a strong addition that fits her arc rather than interrupting it. The effects are solid, the production design is lush, and the whole thing plays well as a family fantasy adventure. Performance-wise, it's a mixed bag in a mostly enjoyable way. Will Smith's Genie can be slightly odd when he goes full blue, but he brings his own flavor and swagger instead of trying to imitate the animated version. Mena Massoud is likable, though the hero role doesn't always give him enough edge to pop. Naomi Scott is the standout, charismatic, poised, and convincingly determined. Marwan Kenzari's Jafar feels less imposing than you might want for a villain this iconic, even if he's serviceable. I also get why this movie had a rough road before it even hit theaters. The 1992 animated film is a beloved classic, and Disney's track record with remakes naturally invites suspicion. Sometimes these projects can feel like brand maintenance rather than storytelling passion. On top of that, Aladdin brings a big cultural question. Where's the line between respectful representation and a glossy, theme park version of Middle Eastern and South Asian influences? There's also the practical concern of whether a more grounded, real-world aesthetic can make the magic feel truly magical without turning into uncanny CGI overload. One thing that's genuinely distracting, though, is the vocal approach. Whether it was a deliberate choice to avoid a patchwork of inconsistent accents or simply a studio decision, a lot of the cast speak and sing with very modern, very generic American inflections. In a setting clearly inspired by real cultures and regions, that can feel oddly flat and occasionally pulls you out of the world, especially with Aladdin himself. Still, the movie has real strengths: energetic choreography, colorful costumes, detailed sets, and enough charm to overcome its cheesier moments. I went in expecting to roll my eyes and ended up having a good time. It's not perfect, but it's fun, bright, and easy to recommend if you want a light, crowd-pleasing fantasy that it definitely feels like the film borrows a few tricks from movie traditions where big, colorful musical set pieces are the norm. The songs and dances are staged to impress, and you can tell real effort went into making them crowd-pleasers. At the same time, some of that pageantry doesn't always land as gracefully as it wants to. A few of the visuals read more like a polished display than an organic piece of the world. Less lush, less textured, and the choreography can come off a bit restrained when it's clearly aiming for grandeur. Prince Ali is the clearest example. It's designed as a showstopper, and it is lively and lavish in parts. Yet it still feels oddly hollow at the edges, like the scene is hitting the beats of spectacle without fully bursting into life. I'm also slightly hesitant about how the production plays with a setting that draws so strongly from real-world cultures. Yes, the city is fictional, more storybook composite than direct representation, and in that sense it's similar to how fantasy accents or aesthetics can exist without mapping neatly onto a real country or people. The adventure matters more than the exact geopolitical reality of the place. Still, the inspiration is close enough to reality that it's hard not to notice the tightrope the film is walking. And to be clear, I'm not the ideal person to deliver a final verdict on cultural sensitivity here, only to flag that the influence is plainly visible and may land differently depending on who's watching. On a more concrete storytelling level, there are moments when the script seems to strain a little too hard to underline its message. The later placement of Jasmine's speechless, for instance, plays less like a natural outpouring and more like the movie pausing to make sure you caught the point. That tension between letting the medium speak for itself and delivering a clear, modern theme is something a lot of mainstream blockbusters wrestle with, especially when reworking older stories for contemporary audiences. The intention is admirable. The execution is occasionally heavy-handed. What stands out most to me overall, though, is the film's digital work, because it lives on a strangely uneven sliding scale. In general, CGI tends to look worse the more you lean on it, and it often ages fast. Meanwhile, even visibly artificial effects can hold up if they're used carefully and in the right doses. Here, the problem isn't only that the quality varies, it's that the variation shows up in the wrong places. When the genie goes big, his first big moments, the more maximal displays of power, the flashier climactic flourishes, the effects are clearly synthetic, but they're executed with enough artistry and confidence to feel enchanting. In smaller touches, too, like the carpet, the genie's presence in more grounded scenes, or the environmental fantasy of Agrabah and the Cave of Wonders, the integration is often surprisingly smooth. Then you hit the weaker pockets, and they're hard to ignore. The disparity becomes glaring during certain carpet flight moments, where the compositing can look flimsy, or when the animal characters show up. Iago, Raja, and especially Abu can veer into an awkward zone where they don't feel convincingly real or convincingly stylized. It's baffling when a deliberately exaggerated, magically altered version of a character can look more appealing than the version that's supposed to pass as a living creature. And it's even more puzzling given how many films years earlier managed more persuasive digital animals with fewer resources. All that said, if you don't let yourself get trapped in the weeds, the simplest truth is that this is a thoroughly fun watch. For all the nitpicks available, the craftsmanship is often strong. The costumes pop, the sets have personality, and much of the VFX work does exactly what it needs to do: sell the fantasy and keep things moving. I'm not a fan of some of the accent choices, and there are moments where performances feel pushed a bit broader than necessary, as if the direction wanted extra theatricality. But the ensemble is genuinely likable and capable across the board. Mena Massoud, Naomi Scott, Will Smith, Marwan Kenzari, Nassim Pedrad, and the supporting cast all bring energy that carries you through. And whatever you think of him as a filmmaker overall, Guy Ritchie can still assemble a slick, satisfying crowd pleaser when he's in the right lane. This version delivers the kind of romantic fantasy adventure you'd expect, with enough heart and momentum to keep it buoyant. Even when I disagree with a handful of creative choices, including which musical pieces are emphasized and how, I still think the screenplay, working from a beloved animated predecessor and even older folk roots, largely holds together well. The bones of the story remain classic and sturdy. A poor young man crosses paths with a princess, glimpses a life bigger than the one he's been handed, stumbles into magic that changes his prospects, and has to outwit a power-hungry political schemer along the way. The larger ideas still come through: how power tempts and corrupts, how authenticity matters, how pretending to be someone else eventually collapses under its own weight. And perhaps the most meaningful update is how Jasmine is treated. Earlier versions weren't necessarily trying to shortchange her, but they were shaped by older expectations of what a Disney princess could do in the story. That framework feels outdated now, and this film at least pushes her toward more agency, more will, and a clearer sense of purpose. I still found myself wishing the film took that even further, but it's undeniably a step in a better direction. When it comes down to it, I can't really picture someone watching this movie in good faith and walking away pretending it has zero problems. The real debate is simply how many issues you notice and how much they matter to you. For me, a handful of flaws are definitely noticeable, but none of them are serious enough to ruin the ride. This film mostly wants to do two things: have fun and retell a familiar story in a slightly updated way, with a few ideas that feel more current and a gentle nod toward other cultures. Imperfect? Sure, but it honestly didn't need to be more than this. And I'm not here to take anything away from people who loved it even more than I did, or from viewers who found it frustrating and couldn't get past the shortcomings. All I can say is, I enjoyed myself, and considering how easily a project like this could have fallen apart, that's actually impressive. You don't need to bend over backwards to watch 2019's Aladdin, but if it's already on your radar, or you stumble into it, it's a pretty easy, light watch that's worth giving a chance. Greetings again from the darkness, and welcome to Disney's ongoing parade of live-action remakes. This time, the studio actually manages to land the plane. That doesn't mean there aren't a few curveballs along the way. For starters, Guy Ritchie in the director's chair. Then there's a cast that, for many viewers, will feel mostly unfamiliar. Add in some updated musical choices, including a brand new song for Jasmine, and yes, a hefty helping of CGI. The end result is a remake that's clearly trying to honor the original while also reminding you it's made for a modern audience. Mena Massoud, you may recognize him from Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, steps into the lead role as Aladdin. Early on, he's given the chance to show off energy and athleticism, especially during the fast-paced chase through the marketplace that longtime fans will instantly recognize. Aladdin is still branded with the usual labels, street rat, riff-raff, but the movie makes sure you see him as more than that. Charming, clever, quick on his feet, and ultimately a good-hearted kid trying to survive. And of course, he isn't alone. Abu the monkey isn't just a cute sidekick here. He feels like a true partner in crime, helping him steal, escape, and stumble into trouble at just the right moments. Naomi Scott plays Princess Jasmine with a mix of warmth and ambition. This version leans harder into her desire to shape Agrabia's future rather than just wait for fate to happen to her. She's still trapped by tradition and expected to choose from a conveyor belt of royal suitors, but the film gives her more drive and a clearer voice. Scott's vocals are a standout, especially when Jasmine gets her big new empowerment number, Speechless, which is designed to be a modern crowd pleaser and gives her a moment that's fully her own. Then there's the part that made a lot of people nervous from the start, Genie. Will Smith takes on one of Disney's most iconic roles. And yes, he's walking into the shadow of Robin Williams. Nobody sensible expects him to duplicate that exact lightning-in-a-bottle energy. The good news is, Smith doesn't try to impersonate Williams. Instead, he keeps the spirit of the character intact while adding his own rhythm and personality. It works better than many people expected, especially if you go in with an open mind. He delivers comedy, musical swagger, and even a little sincerity when the story needs it. Now for the villain. Marwan Kenzuri plays Jafar as a man furious about always being second in command and desperate to seize the top spot. I'll be honest, I wouldn't have minded a more intimidating, larger-than-life version of the character. But given the lighter, family-friendly tone this remake leans into, this take on Jafar fits the world they're building. Iago also returns, and instead of the famously loud, cartoonish approach of the original, this version plays it differently, still snarky, just less animated chaos. Supporting roles also help fill out the story, including Jasmine's handmaiden and her father, the Sultan, both of whom add texture and stability to the palace side of things. Comparisons to the 1992 animated classic are unavoidable, especially when you're dealing with characters as famous as Genie. Still, it's a relief that Disney keeps the movie kid-friendly and avoids drifting into the darker, more adult tone some modern blockbusters lean toward. This is still meant to be a family event. And even though Guy Ritchie's filmography includes movies that are absolutely not little kid viewing, he reins things in here and delivers something that plays well across age groups. It's lively, bright enough, and doesn't aim to scare the youngest viewers out of their seats. Ritchie co-wrote the script with John August, known for a lot of his work with Tim Burton, and the runtime stretches to a bit over 2 hours, significantly longer than the animated version. Even so, it rarely feels like it's dragging. Visually, the production design does a lot of heavy lifting. Agrabah, the palace, and the Cave of Wonders are all built with real spectacle in mind, and it's easy to enjoy the craftsmanship even if you're side-eyeing some of the CGI moments. And of course, the music is a major part of why people show up. Alan Menken's classic songs return with updated arrangements, and most of them land well, especially A Whole New World, which still does what it's supposed to do, give the story its emotional lift and sense of wonder. The film also leans into a big, colorful finale with a Bollywood-style celebratory energy. Lots of movement, color, texture, and showmanship, which gives the ending a slightly different flavor from what you remember. If I'm making offers by the end, you can keep the monkey, but I'll take the magic carpet. Now, let's be real about the big picture context. The main reason Disney keeps remaking its animated classics in live action isn't mystery or art, it's money. These remakes are usually built to print profit, and more often than not they end up as safe recreations rather than meaningful upgrades. A lot of what we love about the originals, the exaggerated expression, the cartoon brightness, the playful visual style, can get flattened when translated into live-action realism. From the ones I've seen, some are genuinely rough. Pinocchio and Dumbo stand out in a bad way. A few are solid enough. Beauty and the Beast and Cinderella are fine. The Maleficent films have their own angle that makes them more interesting than the average remake. and the one that actually felt like it broke out of the mold and did something special? Cruella. Also, for pure fun, those 90s live-action 101 Dalmatians movies had more charm than they probably had any right to. This live-action Aladdin, 2019, sits in that small top tier of Disney remakes for me, the ones that actually justify their existence. Alongside The Jungle Book and The Little Mermaid, it's one of the few that land somewhere between solid and surprisingly good. It doesn't gut what people loved about the original, and it isn't just padding the runtime with louder visuals. It feels like it understands the appeal of the source material and tries to build on it instead of merely reprinting it. A big reason it works is the musical side. The songs aren't just there out of obligation. They're staged with real energy, and the movie makes smart little adjustments that give familiar moments a new purpose. One example, One Jump Ahead, is tweaked so it isn't only Aladdin performing for the audience. It becomes him showing Jasmine what his world feels like. That subtle shift adds character and makes the scene feel more personal. And honestly, there's something special about seeing actual people dancing in a full-scale musical number. No matter how iconic 2D animation can be, the physicality of real performers moving in a real space hits different. The choreography is one of the movie's biggest flexes, and the cast sells it with commitment. That said, the film isn't flawless, especially when it comes to Jasmine. There's a moment with Prince Anders that's clearly meant to read as her mocking him, but the tone doesn't land cleanly. It ends up sounding like she's shallow or even rude, like she's responding to a compliment by insulting him back. I get what the intent was, something more like, "Don't reduce me to that," but the delivery doesn't completely communicate it. Still, the overall approach to Jasmine is mostly a net positive. The movie makes her resistance to injustice a consistent thread rather than a single heroic beat. She's given more drive, more agency, and more presence. She even pushes Aladdin to be honest about who he is, and that theme, wanting people to stop hiding behind performance, becomes one of the story's emotional anchors. The actress is strong enough here that it made me curious to check out other stuff she's done, which is more than I expected going in. One of the more interesting things the remake does is lean into power and responsibility as a recurring idea. Jasmine is born into influence and wants to use it for people who are ignored. Genie has enormous power, but is trapped into using it on behalf of others, often serving those who already have more than enough. Jafar starts with little, gains proximity to the throne, and we see exactly how dangerous he becomes the moment he has access to more authority. And Aladdin? He's not hungry for domination. He's hungry for dignity. He's terrified of being seen as disposable. I also like what they did with the role that obviously can't be recreated the same way. The genie in the animated version is iconic, and trying to copy that would have been a disaster. Here, the character gets more internal texture, more humanity, more vulnerability, and for once he has actual personal wants beyond being a magical force of nature. Giving him flaws, and even a genuine romantic thread with Dahlia, Jasmine's handmaiden, adds dimension and makes him feel like someone with a life, not just a fireworks show in human form. Another improvement. The movie does more to humanize the poor and ordinary people. In the 1992 version, most side characters outside the main crew are either cruel, greedy, or written as disposable obstacles. This one spreads empathy around more evenly, and it makes the community feel like a place full of real people with dreams, not just background noise for the protagonist's struggle. Even the romance in the lower-class parts of the story is treated like something sweet and worth rooting for. The magic itself usually feels big and significant, too. Plenty has been changed, but the film still gets some genuinely fun, wish-logic moments out of it, and the spectacle generally feels earned rather than empty. Now, about Will Smith. I've never been a die-hard fan, even long before all the more recent controversies. But I'll give credit where it's due. He's charismatic here, and once he shows up, the movie finds its rhythm. The smartest decision is that he doesn't try to cosplay the original performance. He brings his own vibe, and that's exactly why it works. Any doubts I had about him in the role faded pretty quickly once the story hit its groove. This was actually the first Disney live-action remake I watched all the way through, and I'll admit there's still an underlying "why does this exist" feeling. The foundation is mostly the same, and a lot of changes can feel cosmetic, like the movie wants credit for being different without fully transforming the story. The pacing is also uneven early on. It isn't awful, but the opening stretch drags, and it doesn't really click into "this is fun" territory until Genie enters the picture. You also have to acclimate to the CGI, which dips into uncanny territory here and there. Once you adjust, though, it becomes a pretty enjoyable ride, almost sliding into rom-com energy at times, and that plays better than you'd expect. The third act isn't quite as strong as the middle portion, but it doesn't ruin the experience. Part of why it still works is that several character arcs actually reach satisfying conclusions. A few beats feel a little forced in the broader context of who these characters are, but most of it lands well enough to feel earned. In the end, I'd call it a genuinely entertaining remake, even if it doesn't fully justify itself. The best part is still the music. Those songs stick around in your head long after the credits. Of course, that's also part of what makes it feel unnecessary, because most of the soundtrack is inherited rather than reinvented, and some musical sequences are staged, so, similarly to the animated film, they might as well be live-action replicas. I genuinely don't get Disney's current obsession with remaking their animated hits as live-action films. I mean, yes, money, obviously, but that explanation only goes so far when the result is often a movie that feels like a near shot-for-shot replay of something people already love. What's the rush to? In 2019 alone, they were pumping these out back-to-back, and it makes me wonder why they wouldn't pace them out a little. Save one for a rainy day, you know? This time it's Aladdin, and it's fine. Not a disaster, not a revelation, just mostly what you'd expect. The plot doesn't really deviate much from the blueprint. Aladdin's a scrappy street kid with big dreams. Jasmine's the princess who wants more control over her own future, and Jafar is lurking in the background, trying to pull the kingdom's strings. Aladdin ends up drawn into a risky mission that leads him to a mysterious cave, a certain lamp, and, surprise, a genie who can grant 3 wishes. From there you've got the same tug-of-war. Aladdin hoping wishes will help him earn Jasmine's love, and Jafar eyeing power like it's the only thing in the world worth having. Where the movie actually works best is the casting, especially when it comes to Will Smith. He's the glue holding the whole thing together. His Genie isn't trying to replicate the animated version beat for beat, which is honestly the only smart way to do it. He brings energy, charisma, and enough personality to make the movie feel more alive whenever he's on screen. Even when the film is playing it safe, he makes it watchable. Mena Massoud does a solid job as Aladdin. Charming, likable, and believable as the diamond in the rough. And Jasmine, played by Naomi Scott, comes off as a stronger and more modernized version of the character. The film clearly wants her to be more than just the prize at the end of the story, and that's one of the better updates. She's given more agency and a bigger voice here, including a showstopper moment meant to underline that she's not content to sit quietly while others decide her fate. My bigger issue is Jafar. The performance didn't really land for me. He didn't feel intimidating enough, and visually he didn't match the kind of menacing presence I associate with the character. He comes off more like a guy who's annoyed he isn't in charge, yet rather than someone you truly believe could take over an entire kingdom. As a whole, I'd still rank this one above Disney's live-action Beauty and the Beast. That movie always felt oddly stiff to me, like a polished TV special rather than a theatrical film. Aladdin can be slow at the start too, but once the genie is properly introduced, the pacing feels better and the movie finally gets some spark. There are a few additions. One of the more noticeable ones is expanding the genie's personal storyline, so he's not just a magical wish machine. But even with those tweaks, this is mostly the same ride you've already been on. It's not trying to shock you, challenge you, or reinvent much. It's comfort food cinema. Familiar songs, familiar scenes, familiar beats, just dressed up with modern effects. And that's kind of the bigger point with these remakes. Disney is basically mining its own greatest hits because original blockbuster scripts are harder to come by and nostalgia sells. From a business standpoint, it's a brilliant strategy. From a creative standpoint, it can feel cautious to a fault, like they're terrified that changing too much will upset the audience they're counting on. So they aim for safe, and the movie ends up being enjoyable in moments, but rarely surprising. Visually, it's glossy, polished, and clearly designed to play big on a theater screen. The supporting side characters and effects, especially the animal companions and magic elements, are handled well enough to keep things moving, and the film checks the expected boxes for spectacle. But when it comes to taking real risks, it mostly stays within the lines. So yeah, Aladdin is a decent crowd pleaser, carried heavily by Will Smith and boosted by a stronger, more empowered Jasmine. But if you're hoping for something that feels truly new rather than a familiar story in a shinier package, this probably won't blow you away. And of course, once you're already in this live-action remake pipeline, it's hard to stop because the next one is always right around the corner. After this, it's The Lion King, and I already know I'll probably end up going. If not for me, then because someone in my house will definitely want to see it. Disney's live-action Aladdin arrives with marketing that practically winks at you. Loud, glossy, and almost self-parodying. The problem is, once the novelty fades, what's left feels strangely empty. Instead of recapturing what made the 1992 animated film such a standout in its lane, this remake mostly underlines how hard it is to improve on something that worked because it was simple, charming, and confident. Co-written and directed by Guy Ritchie, the movie has a slick coat of paint, but not much pulse underneath. The cast rarely feels fully settled into their roles. A lot of the performances play like people performing at Aladdin rather than inhabiting it. The visual effects are a mixed bag, occasionally impressive, frequently uneven, and sometimes outright distracting. And while the film wants to feel grand and modern, it often looks like it's trying too hard to convince you it deserves to exist. The biggest issue is how the remake handles its relationship with the original. Whenever it repeats iconic moments, it tends to do so in a way that highlights the downgrade. Less warmth, less rhythm, less magic. And when it changes or adds material, those tweaks often blur the clarity of the story instead of deepening it. The end result is an odd combination of been there and why did you do that, with very little in between that feels essential. The musical set pieces are the clearest example. They do have scale, crowds, costumes, choreography, the whole show, but the heart is harder to find. In animation, you can push movement, expression, and timing to a level that live action simply can't match. Here, you can sense the movie straining against its own physical limits. It wants the same flamboyant freedom, but reality and live-action CGI keeps pulling it back. That limitation shows up most in the creature work. Abu may be cute, but cute isn't the same as expressive, and some characters lose their personality when translated into semi-realistic animals. The parrot, in particular, feels like a shadow of what it used to be, more like background noise than a character with bite. Performance-wise, there are bright spots, even if they don't fully rescue the film. The actor playing Aladdin has the look and charisma you want, and he sells the romantic lead well enough. Where it gets awkward is when the movie asks him to mimic the heightened animated energy. Those choices can feel unnatural in a real-world setting, like watching someone perform cartoon timing in a space that won't support it. Interestingly, Jafar works better than expected precisely because he's played with restraint. Instead of going big and theatrical, the character comes off controlled, credible, and quietly menacing, arguably more grounded than the film around him. The Sultan also fares better than the broad comic take some viewers remember, which gives those palace scenes a touch more dignity. And then there's the inevitable question, the Genie. No one is going to replace what Robin Williams did. Try would be a losing game. Will Smith wisely doesn't chase that exact energy. He brings a more human, streetwise charm, and at times he's genuinely engaging. In a few moments, his approach even works better for live action because it feels less like non-stop improvisational fireworks and more like a character you can actually follow. Unfortunately, the movie doesn't build enough around him to make that advantage count as much as it could. The film also leans hard into expanding Jasmine's role, which on paper is a sensible update. The issue isn't that she's empowered. She already was. The issue is how loudly the script keeps underlining it, like it doesn't trust the audience to notice strength unless it's announced. Naomi Scott does well, and she carries herself with presence. But the writing sometimes traps her in one fixed mode. I am strong, as a repeated headline rather than a character revealed through varied moments. Ironically, that can make supporting characters with more imperfections feel more alive. There's even a big statement moment that plays like the movies trying to manufacture a modern, inspirational anthem beat by beat. It's not that the intention is bad. It's that the execution feels calculated, like the film is checking a box instead of letting the character's arc naturally earn a crescendo. Stepping back, this remake embodies a frustrating pattern. Lavish production and constant motion used to compensate for a lack of spark. Ritchie's direction is serviceable but rarely memorable. The editing feels busy. The humor doesn't consistently land, and the whole project never seems to understand the main reason the animated classic worked so well. It wasn't because it was bigger. It was because it was cleaner, funnier, and emotionally lighter on its feet. If you're someone with deep affection for the story, whether from the Disney version, an older adaptation, or childhood memories in general, this film will probably still tug at something, simply because the material has that kind of built-in power. That nostalgia effect is real, and it's a big reason these remakes keep attracting audiences. Parents return for a second childhood, kids get a shiny adventure, and everyone walks out feeling like they participated in something familiar. But familiarity isn't the same as enchantment. In the end, this Aladdin has spectacle, but not enough soul. It tries to borrow the magic rather than create its own, and it ends up feeling like a glossy echo, loud while it's on, and easy to forget once it's over. Maybe good propaganda is a real thing. If pop culture is going to shape impressions anyway, I'd honestly rather see Arabs and Muslims connected to the bright, romanticized 1001 Nights kind of fantasy, even if it's undeniably stylized and sometimes stereotypical, than to the grim, headline-driven images that dominate real-world coverage. In that sense, you could even argue there's such a thing as good stereotyping, or at least the lesser of two cultural shortcuts. One thing Disney genuinely got right here is casting. The leads and supporting players feel authentically placed in this world instead of looking like a studio checklist. And even though most of them weren't huge household names, the movie had its anchor, Will Smith. He's a star with enough pull to carry the energy of the film, and it's almost funny how fitting that is. He's basically the Genie of the casting choices. What surprised me most is how little I found myself rolling my eyes at modern polish. This version didn't feel like it was tripping over political correctness, and it mostly avoids that preachy, self-congratulatory vibe that can sink these remakes. Instead, it turns the story into a big, crowd-pleasing spectacle while still landing a message that's sharper than the usual, just be yourself. The takeaway feels closer to any identity you construct to impress people comes with a price, and sooner or later, you pay it. It's a kid-friendly lesson, but there's something quietly adult under it too. The emptiness that comes from chasing a version of yourself you can't actually live in. I'll admit my expectations were low. The trailers didn't sell me, and like a lot of people, I was nervous about the Genie, especially because the early look just felt off. But those worries didn't last long. Within the first stretch of the film, the tone clicks into place, and the movie turns into exactly what it wants to be. Glossy, colorful, and unapologetically designed as a big-screen musical adventure. And yes, Will Smith works. He doesn't try to imitate the animated Genie, and that's the right move. He brings his own rhythm and charisma, and while there are small nods to what came before, it's clearly his version. Honestly, it was one of the first times in ages that I watched him and thought, right, this guy's a movie star. The role fits him perfectly. Mena Massoud and Naomi Scott are strong individually and even better together. Their chemistry does a lot of heavy lifting, and the cast as a whole feels surprisingly in sync, which matters in a film like this where momentum and charm are everything. I've seen people point to Jafar as a weak link, but I didn't find him terrible. Marwan Kenzuri plays him with a controlled menace. If anything, the issue isn't the performance so much as how the script uses him. He could have had more room to be truly intimidating. The smaller roles also land well. and the supporting cast adds personality without hijacking the story. Musically, it delivers what you'd hope for. The familiar songs are here, and they largely hit the nostalgic notes they're supposed to. The new additions don't feel like filler either. They're used to expand Jasmine in a way that makes sense for modern audiences, giving her more presence and agency without turning her into a totally different character. The whole new world sequence, in particular, is the kind of centerpiece moment this movie needed, romantic, grand, and staged like an event. As for Guy Ritchie, this is where expectations matter. If you're going and hoping for a distinctly Ritchie spin, his usual edge, his signature style, that kinetic swagger, you're not really getting it. This plays much more like Disney's live-action blueprint than a director's personal stamp. In a way, it's proof of how these remakes work. The studio's identity comes first, and the director is there to execute, not reinvent. You can feel that limitation. That said, calling it just another remake doesn't tell the whole story. Because within the narrow lane it's allowed to drive in, it actually performs really well. It doesn't pretend to be revolutionary, but it is fun. It's a crowd pleaser that hits a strong nostalgic chord, looks great, sounds great, and is held together by a cast that mostly nails the tone. My biggest complaint is pacing. The runtime is a little heavy, and there are stretches that could have been trimmed to keep the energy consistently high. A tighter cut would have made it even more rewatchable. Still, overall, it's one of the better live-action Disney remakes. Bright, entertaining, surprisingly effective, and easy to recommend if you have any affection for the original. I left the theater thinking it was close to a near-perfect summer movie experience. If I watched it again, I could see it bumping up even higher as, this movie is essentially Disney doing a live-action take on the early 90s animated favorite, full disclosure. I still haven't actually watched the original all the way through. And honestly, sitting through it can feel like enduring a lot of modern Disney's live-action routine. Polished, loud, and sometimes weirdly exhausting. Jafar, for me, is the biggest ugh factor. He's basically a walking ambition machine with very little personality beyond "I want power," and that single-note vibe gets old fast. Jasmine is Jasmine, capable, principled, and written to be inspiring, but I've never been someone who naturally clicks with the Disney princess archetype. I get why she worked for the audience the movie is made for. She's just not my kind of character. That said, I understand the goal here. It's a family film, and it mostly succeeds at being exactly that. I'm not the target demographic, and I also tend to steer clear of Disney's animated catalog these days, with a few exceptions, so this didn't exactly convert me. If anything, it reminded me why I don't rush out for these remakes. If I had my way, I would have rather seen the filmmaker go back to the folklore roots and rebuild the story from the ground up instead of tracing the animated version so closely. But given the reality of blockbuster expectations and the director's recent track record, playing it safe probably wasn't optional. Do we need this movie? Not really, but that's true of most movies. As a theater experience, it's not a total disaster. It's watchable, occasionally fun, and rarely offensive, just rarely surprising. The story, familiar to a fault if you know the animated film, you know the beats here. It's basically the same narrative with a handful of tweaks. One or two changes are genuinely interesting, but most feel like extra decoration rather than meaningful improvements. The biggest issue is that the movie assumes you already know the world and characters, which makes some early scenes feel strangely hurried. The opening especially moves at a sprint. It barrels through setup that normally helps you settle into the story, and it drops Jasmine into her incognito in the marketplace moments so quickly that it almost feels like the movie is winking at you. You know who she is, right? There's even a mildly confusing moment where a name is used that makes you wonder whether the disguise is meant to fool the characters, the audience, or both. The best upgrade. Jafar's early role here's the twist. While I don't love Jafar overall, the remake setup for him is one of the smarter improvements. He feels more active and more present early on, pushing events forward instead of just hovering around waiting for the plot to deliver him what he wants. Rather than relying on vague, unexplained villain magic logic, he's shown testing people, forcing the situation, and making a deliberate choice about who matters and why. There's even a brief sense of parallel between him and Aladdin. Two people starting with nothing, both believing they can climb higher, except one of them chooses a darker path. That early framing works, and it gives the story a bit more momentum. After that, though, he largely settles back into the usual villain groove. Genie, good performance. Impossible comparison. Will Smith does well as the Genie, and he brings enough charm to make the role feel like its own interpretation. The problem isn't that he's bad. It's that the shadow of the earlier iconic version is basically unavoidable. When a movie lets Smith be Smith, it works. When it tries to recreate familiar comedic rhythms too closely, it starts to feel like imitation rather than reinvention. His style is smoother and more grounded, not a rapid-fire impression machine. So the moments that lean hard into remember this scene, energy can feel slightly off. Music and spectacle. A mixed bag, unsurprisingly. The music mostly sticks to what everyone expects, with some small lyrical cleanups and modern smoothing. The big showpieces are visually flashy and generally entertaining. Lots of effects, bright costumes, choreographed movement, the whole production line spectacle. Friend Like Me is probably the strongest blend of effects plus performance plus choreography. Prince Ali is fun and colorful, though it feels a little more contained than you might want from a moment that's supposed to explode across the screen. Jasmine's new song is performed with real commitment, but it also feels like the movie pauses everything to make room for it. It's not that it's bad. It just feels like it belongs to a slightly different movie. Final thoughts on its own terms. This is an okay remake, competently made, often enjoyable in the moment, and mostly faithful to what people remember. But it's also weighed down by a rushed beginning, added serious plot threads that don't add much, and a final stretch that drags when it should be building momentum. I was skeptical about the director choice from the start, and even more so after that previous big fantasy outing of his. But to the movie's credit, it doesn't try to force a wild stylistic overhaul. It mostly respects the source and updates a few things that needed updating. Jafar is adjusted in ways that make more sense. The Genie is reinterpreted instead of copy-pasted, and the leads do a solid job, even if it takes a few scenes to fully settle into their versions of the characters. So yeah, not essential, not magical, not terrible. A serviceable live-action redo with a couple of genuine improvements, just not enough to make me want more of these. If there's one reason this remake earns a ticket, it's the sheer nostalgia rush of a whole new world. That moment still works. The music swells, the visuals go big, and for a few minutes you remember exactly why people love this story in the first place. Disney's Aladdin, 2019, is a live-action remake that sticks astonishingly close to the animated classic. It's colorful, loud, packed with CGI, and built almost beat for beat on the earlier film's blueprint. Same story structure, many of the same songs, and even a similar tone. And that's both its strength and its limitation. Let's be honest up front. The original animated movie is still the stronger version. It has more energy, sharper comedic timing, and a kind of lightning-in-a-bottle magic that's hard to replicate. That said, the 2019 version does try to modernize the material in a way that feels intentional. It clearly wants to be more socially aware and more careful about representation than the earlier adaptation, which drew criticism over the years. The casting leans more toward authenticity than before, even if the lead characters still feel largely shaped by Western storytelling and performance styles. It's a step in a better direction, though not a complete transformation. Performances. Will Smith versus the shadow of the original. The biggest talking point is the Genie. Will Smith doesn't simply copy what came before, and that's the smartest choice he could have made. Instead of doing an impression, he brings his own charisma, more pop star swagger, more modern comedy rhythm, and a lighter, friendlier vibe. But the comparison is unavoidable, and the bar is almost unfairly high. Some of the effects choices around the Genie also feel inconsistent, occasionally impressive, occasionally distracting, so the visuals don't always enhance the performance the way they should. Mena Massoud plays Aladdin with a likable, earnest energy, and Naomi Scott's Jasmine has moments where she truly feels like the film's emotional center. Their chemistry isn't always as spark-heavy as the animated couple's dynamic, but they do enough to keep the story moving. And the quieter,